it's not exactly accurate to say I'm studying seriously because I was always serious about it.
Well,
I'm just directing it in a more disciplined way, I think.
Paul Simon has always listened differently. Not for hits, but for truth. Over time, he revealed 10 albums that shaped how he hears the world, records that challenged him, unsettled him, and stayed with him. But what do these choices really say about the music he trusts? Number 1, The Freewheelin Bob Dylan by Bob Dylan. For Paul Simon, this album was confrontation. Dylan's songwriting redefined what lyrics could carry: direct, political, unguarded. Simon heard not just songs, but permission. Simplicity became power, and suddenly, honesty mattered more than polish or perfection. Dylan arrived at a time when popular music still favored clarity over challenge, yet songs like Blowin' in the Wind carried questions instead of answers, inviting listeners into uncertainty rather than resolution. For Simon, that shift was profound. It suggested that songwriting could hold tension without explaining itself, that meaning could live in suggestion rather than statement. Dylan once said, "I don't write songs for anyone to understand. I write them because I have to." And that instinct to create without compromise reshaped Simon's sense of artistic responsibility.
The too many people have died.
There was also a rawness in Dylan's delivery that refused decoration. His voice carried conviction over beauty, prioritizing truth over technique. Simon recognized that immediately. It was not about sounding perfect, it was about sounding necessary. In the end, Dylan did not just influence Simon, he gave him permission to say more by saying less. Number 2, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. This record taught Simon restraint. Miles Davis created music that felt spacious and unresolved, yet complete. Simon absorbed that quiet confidence, the idea that emotion can exist without urgency, and that silence can shape feeling just as deeply as sound. When Kind of Blue was recorded, it rejected the complexity dominating jazz at the time. Instead of dense chord changes, Davis leaned into modal structures, allowing musicians to explore fewer notes with greater depth. For Simon, this approach revealed something essential. Limitation was not restriction, it was focus. Each note carried intention because there was space around it. Davis once explained, "It's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play." And that philosophy became a quiet foundation for how Simon understood musical clarity. There was also a sense of trust within the record. The musicians were not competing for attention, they were listening, responding, leaving room. Simon recognized that interplay as something deeper than technique. It was discipline shaped by patience. In the end, Kind of Blue showed him that music does not need to rush to be powerful, it only needs to know when to stop. Number 3, Revolver by the Beatles. With Revolver, structure dissolved into experimentation. Simon heard a band reshaping pop from within, using the studio as a tool of invention. It proved that risk did not mean chaos. It could be controlled, deliberate, and still feel entirely new. What stood out was how seamlessly innovation was embedded into songcraft. Tracks like Eleanor Rigby stripped away traditional rock instrumentation, while Tomorrow Never Knows leaned into tape loops and sonic repetition. For Simon, this was not experimentation for its own sake. It was purpose-driven. The studio became part of the composition itself, not just a place to record it. As Paul McCartney once reflected, we were trying to make sounds that had never been heard before, and that pursuit of new textures resonated deeply with Simon's evolving sense of musical boss. Every sound, no matter how unconventional, felt intentional. Simon recognized that discipline, the idea that experimentation still required control. In the end, Revolver showed him that boundaries are not meant to be followed, they are meant to be redesigned. Number 4, Astral Weeks by Van Morrison. Astral Weeks felt fluid, almost intangible. Simon was drawn to its drifting form, songs that moved between genres without settling. It suggested that music could be intuitive and elusive, yet still carry an emotional coherence beneath its surface. Van Morrison approached the album less like a collection of songs and more like a continuous stream of feeling. The arrangements seemed to unfold in real time, guided by instinct rather than structure. For Simon, this looseness was revealing. It showed that precision did not always require rigidity. Emotion could lead, and form could follow. Morrison once described the process as just letting it flow, not trying to control it too much, and that philosophy echoed in how Simon later allowed his own work to breathe. There was also a sense of vulnerability in the album's openness. Nothing felt forced, yet everything felt deliberate. Simon understood that balance as rare, even fragile in its honesty. In the end, Astral Weeks proved that structure does not need to be visible to be felt, it only needs to be trusted. Number 5. The Band by The Band. This album grounded Simon in storytelling. The band created songs that felt lived in, rooted in history and place. Simon heard music that wasn't performed but inhabited, where narrative and sound merged into something quietly authentic. What made the record so distinct was its sense of perspective. Songs like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down did not simply describe events, they embodied them. Characters, voices, and moments felt embedded in the music itself. For Simon, this was a revelation. Storytelling in song did not need to be decorative or distant. It could feel immediate, almost physical. Robbie Robertson once explained that they were trying to write songs that felt like they'd always been there, and that timelessness became central to how Simon thought about narrative in music.
He said, I will fix your rack if you take old Jack, my dog.
There was also a collective identity within the album. No single voice dominated. Instead, the music moved as a shared expression, shaped by interplay rather than hierarchy. Simon recognized that balance as something rare. In the end, the band showed him that the strongest songs do not just tell stories, they carry them. Number 6. Innervisions by Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder fused complexity with accessibility. Simon admired how Innervisions balanced groove with message, never sacrificing one for the other. It showed that music could be socially aware and musically rich without losing its immediacy. The album moved effortlessly between deeply personal reflection and broader social commentary. Songs like Living for the City carried narrative weight, while still anchored in rhythm and melody. For Simon, this balance was striking. It proved that message did not have to overpower music, it could live inside it. Wonder once said, "Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand." And that universality shaped how Simon thought about connection across audiences.
But she is short and pretty. Skirt is short, a lot of legs are sturdy.
There was also a sense of control in Wonder's work. Every layer, every sound felt intentional, yet fluid. Simon understood that as mastery without distance. It never felt calculated, only deeply felt and carefully guided throughout each transition and musical shift. In the end, Innervisions showed him that depth and accessibility are not opposites. They are strongest when they move together. Number 7. Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. Exile on Main Street felt loose, almost unstable. Simon heard a band embracing imperfection, letting songs breathe unevenly. That rawness gave the music credibility, proof that flaw and texture can make something feel more alive. Recorded in fragmented sessions across shifting locations, the album carried a sense of disarray that became part of its identity. Songs blurred into each other, tempos shifted, vocals drifted slightly, off-center. For Simon, this was not carelessness. It was intention through acceptance. The music did not aim for polish, it aimed for presence. Keith Richards once said, "It's the feel that matters, not the perfection," and that philosophy resonated deeply with Simon's own instincts. There was also a density to the sound, layers of guitars, horns, and rhythm that felt almost chaotic, yet somehow cohesive. Simon understood that balance as fragile, even risky. It required trust in the moment, rather than control over every detail. In the end, Exile on Main Street showed him that imperfection is not something to fix. It is something to trust, preserve, and even protect. Number 8. Blue by Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell's Blue was stripped to its core. Simon recognized the risk in such vulnerability, songs that felt almost too personal. Yet that exposure became its strength, turning private emotion into something deeply universal. What made Blue so powerful was its refusal to hide. The arrangements were minimal, leaving Mitchell's voice and lyrics exposed without protection. Songs like A Case of You carried an intimacy that felt almost intrusive, as if the listener had stepped into something private. For Simon, this level of honesty was both rare and necessary. Mitchell once said, "If I am truthful, it will resonate." And that belief aligned closely with Simon's own understanding of emotional connection. There was also a clarity in her songwriting, every word deliberate, every phrase carrying weight without excess. Simon recognized that precision as discipline beneath vulnerability. It revealed control inside openness and strength within emotional exposure. In the end, Blue proved that the more personal a song becomes, the more universal it can feel and endure far beyond its moment. Number 9. The Rhythm of the Saints by Paul Simon. This album reflects Simon's own evolution. Drawing from global rhythms, it merges influence with identity. It marks a moment where listening became creation, where outside sounds were not borrowed, but transformed into something distinctly his. What defines the record is its sense of immersion. Instead of layering influences on top, Simon allowed them to reshape the foundation of the music itself. Brazilian percussion, complex rhythmic cycles, and subtle melodic shifts created songs that moved differently, less linear, more fluid. For Simon, this was not experimentation for its own sake. It was a deeper form of collaboration, where listening became the primary act of creation. As he once reflected, the rhythm is the thing that tells you where to go, and that idea guided the entire project.
People say the sky is just the sky, but I say, you're not the obvious child.
There was also a quiet confidence in the album's restraint. It did not announce its ambition, it revealed it gradually, through texture and movement. Simon understood that subtlety as strength, not limitation. In the end, The Rhythm of the Saints showed that influence is not something you take, it is something you become. Number 10. Graceland by Paul Simon. Graceland stands as transformation. Simon stepped beyond familiar boundaries, collaborating across cultures to reshape his sound. It represents a philosophy, listening first, then creating, where music becomes a bridge rather than a boundary. The album emerged from a willingness to step into unfamiliar territory. South African musicians brought rhythms, textures, and structures that reshaped Simon's songwriting from the inside. Songs like Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes carried a sense of movement that felt entirely new, yet deeply rooted. For Simon, this was not about blending styles, it was about trusting them. He once said, "You have to listen to what the music is telling you." And that openness became the defining force behind the record.
Man walks down a street in a strange world. Maybe it's the third world, maybe it's his first time.
There was also a sense of responsibility within the album's creation. Collaboration required humility, awareness, and trust across cultural lines. Simon recognized that weight and allowed it to shape the work rather than control it. In the end, Graceland proved that music is not confined by borders. It expands when you are willing to cross them. When Paul Simon speaks about albums, he is not listing favorites. He is mapping a philosophy of listening. Each of these records, Dylan's clarity, Davis's restraint, the Beatles' invention, Mitchell's vulnerability, reveals a different way to trust sound, and more importantly, to trust instinct. What connects them is not genre, era, or style. It is intention. These albums do not chase perfection. They pursue honesty. They leave space, take risks, and allow imperfection to carry meaning. That sensibility runs quietly through Simon's own work, shaping songs that feel both intimate and expansive at once. Because in the end, influence is not about imitation. It is about permission. Permission to listen deeper, to create honestly, and to leave something behind that still feels alive. Which of these albums speaks to you the most? Share your thoughts, and if this kind of storytelling resonates with you, subscribe for more.